Hello. It's the last day of summer. I hope you had a good one. So yes, this is about Monero, privacy, and the circular economy. And nothing here is financial advice. So the agenda, I'll tell a little bit about my crypto background, the history of money, digital money, which is the current iteration, circular and parallel economies, summarize everything, and then at the end there'll be questions. So my crypto background, between 2014 and 2015, I worked for Rakuten, and I went out to Tokyo, Japan, and worked on integrating Bitcoin as a payment method at one of the largest e-commerce companies in Japan. And this is a photo I took at a restaurant that accepted Bitcoin at the time, and you could see things have changed. And I also worked in San Francisco as well to continue that initiative for Rakuten.com. I took a kind of a break in 2022, so the beginning of this year, I decided to start thinking about crypto again, and I decided to make a directory for Monero, Monerica. So what can you do? Can you live with Monero? Is this just some speculative investment, or is this a lifestyle? Is this a reality? So I wanted to aggregate everything and put it out there. Additionally, this year, I'm also a software developer. I completed a Web 3.0 Solidity course. So I learned how to make smart contracts. I made a decentralized lending app so people could contribute and get loans without any kind of identification on Ethereum. So that was successful. And then, as was mentioned, I DJ'd at the Monerotopia conference in Miami Beach to help spread the word about Monerica, my site, and have a presence, a loud presence. So the evolution of money. So money started out as a form of bartering. There were trading goods and services for other goods and services. This is obviously not easy to be portable, so other means came around to store value. Stones, very large stones, were used, seashells, beads, and eventually things like cattle were used. And these were ways to store value. They were not the most rare, but they were somewhat rare. But they were fragile, and sometimes these were things like commodities like cattle. After this was things like silver and gold, and these were more durable, more portable, rarer. They could be divided more easily, and these are also in the line of commodities. From here, we had fiat currencies and government-issued money. We have things like paper banknotes and the introduction of things like monetary policies. And in our current iteration of money, what we work for and believe in is really digital money. So these are online global payments that we can buy things all over the world without shipping checks around and things like that, and cryptography-based money. So cryptography-based money, we have cryptocurrencies. Everyone knows Bitcoin as being the first real cryptocurrency, and some of the problems that it tried to solve, removed these intermediaries that could be corrupted and these payment processors that could block your transactions and things. It wanted to be decentralized and peer-to-peer, so no one could stop anything. It was more me to you. In addition to that, it had a known and predictable coin supply issuance. So today, if the Federal Reserve wants to wake up and print another $1 trillion, you have no say in that. But with something that's an open source code, you know how much there will be. So that was a change. It's a settlement and a transaction layer. So it takes much less time than it would with a bank. If you've ever tried to send money overseas, it could take days or weeks, but the settlement process is much faster, minutes to hours. So unlike the money that we have that is really the bank's money, with crypto, with Bitcoin, it's your own money. It's self-custodied. So you have the private key, you own it, not the bank. And another very important thing is it can't be counterfeit. So as much as we may want to believe in cash, a lot of counterfeit cash exists. And it rewards individuals for participating in the network. It's not just the corporation that gets involved. So people were able to participate, and miners get rewarded for that with transaction fees and mining rewards. And another important thing is these transactions are irreversible. No one can come in and just change the history of who sent who to what. And now the danger with digital money are these CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And these are really the antithesis of what cryptocurrencies are about. They're not private, they're centralized, they're trying to eliminate cash, they try to control our individual and spending habits. Some of the things that are proposed are you have a quota for how much meat or alcohol or whatever it is that they want to control the economy. That's what they're trying to implement. They can have monetary policies, so instead of sending checks that take weeks and crazy amount of approval, they could really just press a button and send that to you. So that's what they're trying to sell. It's an easy way for you to get a stimulus, but they can also control the money supply very easily. And I see this CBDCs as really government's response to cryptocurrencies. They're trying to fight this movement with their own technology. And this is not some theoretical thing. This is happening today. In China, currently, they are trying a CBDC. Russia, currently they have it, and they're expected to roll it out in 2024. India in 2023. Europe next year, they're going to have this rolled out. And the United States, though it's technically not a CBDC, it's FedNow, which is a step towards a CBDC. And that's going to happen, from my research, between May and July of next year. So this is all coming very soon. Blockchains. So with digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, you have blockchains. So some of the features of blockchains are that they're decentralized, unlike the banks that, they're all over instead of one central entity. You can't double spend your money, so every transaction is uniquely verified. It's a faster settlement than it would be with a bank. And blocks are mined and miners get rewarded. Coins are minted through different processes. The two that most people are aware of or that are common are they're proof of work, so computational power or staking. But some of the problems with blockchains are that they do enable mass surveillance when privacy is not thought about. And the other problem that a lot of people have said to me is they don't even trust themselves with the passwords, so whatever, but that's really important. You are responsible. It's on you. If you lose your password, there's no one you can call if it's in your own personal wallet. If it's in an exchange wallet, that's a different story. So blockchains, basic architecture, there's a first block, and then blocks after that. Each one references the previous one. And so there's a mining process that occurs, and it would be very difficult for someone to rewrite history, just start a computer and say, I don't want your transactions to count anymore, I want only mine. So it's very cost prohibitive to change that, which secures the network. And so just to visualize centralization versus decentralization, like Bank of America, they don't like you, every transaction goes through them, they can turn you off. With decentralization, it's more resilient. There's many different networks. Every single node has the full history of everything, and they can restart. So if one of those nodes in the decentralized networks goes down, it can come back. So in terms of blockchains, we have many different ones, but the ones I'm focusing on here are Bitcoin and Monero. So the first Bitcoin transaction was 2009, had an anonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, and the Bitcoin initially was pseudonymous. So there's an ID, but we don't know who it is necessarily until it escapes that system. Monero, first transaction 2014, similar to Bitcoin. It had an anonymous founder called Nicholas van Saberhagen, and unlike pseudonymity, it has full anonymity was its goal. It implements a lot of the privacy features that Bitcoin developers did not want to include. So there were things that were proposed for Bitcoin, but they didn't get included. And Monero is, to some extent, a reaction to that, Bitcoin not changing. And the word Monero means coin in Esperanto, which is a language that's intended to be an international language. So when we get into the privacy, Bitcoin, pseudonymous, so there's an ID, but and if you didn't exit the system, no one would know who you are. But as soon as you do, that's where the problems occur. So your personal data is linkable to the wallet address. So if you sent money to the exchange or from the exchange to a wallet, they can identify that because the wallet address is on the blockchain. And then other things that are bad with Bitcoin's privacy, the amounts that are sent can be seen, the history of every transaction can be seen, and the wallet balance of any wallet is shown to everyone all the time, forever. So very dangerous once you associate a wallet with someone. Monero takes this further to be fully anonymous, so your personal data is not linkable to the wallet address because the wallet address is not on the blockchain. There's a stealth address. And so the amounts can't be seen because of the technology of confidential transactions. And the history of the coin can't be determined as a result. And also, yes, the wallet balance isn't shown as either. So as an example, you see this wallet, I just randomly went onto the blockchain.com, and this number 1, capital G, capital X, this address, at the time that I looked at it, it had 2.55 Bitcoin worth $50,000. So that could be associated with an individual, and it's just like looking directly into their bank account. And another example is this address, this same address at some point on the 8th of September at that time sent this amount of Bitcoin. So we see where the funds are flowing in and out and how much they have at all times. Very dangerous. Monero is learned from Bitcoin, and it tries to do things differently. So instead of you just being that signer and they know it's you, you have many different transactions, many different things going on to where it's hidden. There's no clear way to determine who actually made that transaction. And the architecture of Monero is such that you have the sender, the receiver, the amount, and even the connection all having some kind of obfuscation technology. So the sender has a ring signature, there's a confidential transaction between the two parties, the receiver has an address that doesn't show up, and there's also a way that it uses bouncing around the internet to further obfuscate the connections. So to compare a transaction in the Monero world, this is a transaction I found randomly. Since it's a blockchain, of course, you can go to a website and see all the transactions. But the difference here is that, so what I can tell is that what block it's in, the fee that was paid, and the size. But I don't know how much it was that was sent. I don't know who sent it, and I don't know where it's going. So those are the most important parts of obscuring, what happens. And this leads to the topic of fungibility. So fungibility in Bitcoin is not fungible because 2 units are not equal. You know the history. So if you got a dollar bill and you knew everywhere that was, you would probably not want it. Or maybe you would want it if it was fresh. Who knows, right? Like if you really knew the history of a dollar bill. Well, that's what Bitcoin is like, knowing the history of a dollar bill. And as a result of this, there have been exchanges that have closed accounts. If you were using known funds that were stolen or illegal, you're going to have your account shut down. If you used a mixing service to try to obfuscate your transactions, then, well, they can shut you down as well. That has happened. And even if you're trying to donate to a social cause that the government doesn't like, they can know if you say bought your coins, Bitcoin on Coinbase, and you sent it. So for the Canadian truckers convoy, many people know of this. It was an example where people tried to use GoFundMe, and then they said, we can't, we have to comply. We can't let this happen. And then people said, great, we'll use Bitcoin. Well, for the people that use Bitcoin, it didn't help. They were caught, and now they don't have access to their money or their accounts anymore. So very dangerous. Also, institutions, like, they don't want to invest in certain things. They have certain rules and regulations they have to follow. So they could tell you that this Bitcoin was mined in China and it was using coal because we know what mining factory it was. And as a result, that Bitcoin is worth less. People don't want that. Certain organizations and institutions won't be able to invest in Bitcoin that wasn't mined according to their corporate rules. And people try to say Bitcoin can be used privately and you can join it and you can mix it, but that's highly suspicious and you can tell when that's happened, and people have had their accounts shut down as a result. And just guilt by association. Someone hacks something, does something illegal with their funds that's known, and they send those funds to you because you just say, tip me in Bitcoin. Well, now you have to explain, why did a terrorist send you Bitcoin? Monero embraces fungibility so that two units are the same because the history is not known. And the mine, where it was mined, how it was mined, cannot be determined. And this makes it more like a cash or a gold, and this prevents it from being blacklisted. Another aspect to compare both of these on is decentralization. So Bitcoin has application-specific hardware that's used. So Bitcoin has specific miners that you have to buy, and that is very wasteful because another one comes around, They're just throwing all this computing hardware in the trash because it can't be used for anything other than mining Bitcoin. It's very wasteful in that regard, but it also makes it more centralized. So because of this economy that has been created because of Bitcoin, you have very large mining farms, and those mining farms are easy to find. They are very big, they're using lots of energy, and they're just very clear targets. So it really destroys the idea that it's decentralized when you have to have this giant factory. Monero was aware of this problem, and they implemented something different once they saw this as a threat. Once this became the way cryptocurrency was evolving, specialized hardware, they tried to do something different. So it's ASIC resistant, and it minimizes the effect that this kind of hardware can have. And one of the ways it does that is by using lots of memory. So you can maybe build lots of hardware, but the memory is in shorter supply. And it's using something called random X, and this has other random math involved. And as a result, this leads to the network being more distributed. There aren't Monero mining farms, just more individual computers. So to show the effects of this, when China decided to ban Bitcoin mining last year, the network hash rate, which is the computational power that secures the network, dropped almost in half very quickly because of this centralization. And Monero during a similar time had very small of a dip and has kept on chugging. So that's the danger of the network not being decentralized, is one country or a few countries can immediately reduce its power. So to talk about the actual tokens themselves, they are different. And so Bitcoin, as many people know, has 21 million that will ever be produced. At this moment today, there's 19.1. Every 10 minutes, there's a new block. And at that 10 minutes, currently, that's 6.25 Bitcoin that are materialized. And the reward is cut in half every 4 years until 2140, when there will be none left. And so this is dangerous because the mining reward getting lower is saying that the network cannot just exist off mining the blocks. It has to have fees. So the fees could go higher and higher to offset some of this as the Bitcoin dries up. And beyond this, the divisibility is different. So one Bitcoin, you can own less than one Bitcoin. You can own up to 8 decimal places to the right. So that's called one Satoshi. But it's further divisible. So Monero took a different approach. There's actually no maximum supply, But currently, there's less Monero than there are Bitcoin. There's 18.1. And the blocks are not every 10 minutes. They're every 2 minutes. And as of June this year, to deal with this problem that Bitcoin has, Monero implemented a tail emission. So every 2 minutes for eternity, there's always going to be, for the miner that gets that, 0.6 Monero. And Monero is also more divisible than Bitcoin. It's to 12 decimal places instead of just 8. So here's a visualization of what I was just talking about. And you can see the halvings with Bitcoin and Monero taking a different approach, and 2022 being the year where there's a perpetual reward. And also you can see that there's actually going to be less Monero than there is Bitcoin until about 2040. So when you look at today, one Monero and one Bitcoin, they're quite similar, 18.19, 18 versus 19 million. So also scalability, like can this be used as a medium of exchange? And one of the things when I went to Japan that I observed was how hard it would be for this Bitcoin network to scale as a real global payment network. It can only do 7 transactions per second, and due to the white paper being some kind of dogma for some reason, it can't be more than a block size of 1 megabyte. And for a transaction to occur, it's not just you send it to somebody and it's done. Like, you need to wait some time. So it's generally accepted if you're sending it to an exchange or a business, you need to wait for 6 confirmations, so 10 minutes, so that's about 60 minutes until you can say that Bitcoin is never going to be changed or go to anyone else. The miners have approved this. It's like nearly impossible that's going to change. Monero is faster. It takes a different approach. So as opposed to a block size that's limited at 1 megabyte, it's dynamic. So therefore, the transactions per second is actually unlimited theoretically. Now, it hasn't hit that yet, hasn't hit the dynamic block size. There hasn't been that many yet, but it's designed to deal with problems that Bitcoin has. And you would wait 10 to 15 transactions, or 10 to 15 blocks for your transaction to be safe. So it's faster. So you're 2 or 3 times faster as well for that settlement. In terms of economic freedom, we have to ask, so both Bitcoin and Monero are self-custodied. You do have a passphrase that gives you access to your wallet. That's true. But Bitcoin is traceable. It's not fungible. You need to really know where that coin came from to really have confidence in it. It's like buying a house and without knowing who the owner was. Like, you have to know that to participate in that economy safely. And as a result of it not being fungible, the miners could block the transactions. If you're sending a transaction and they don't want that, well, I heard there was an OFAC compliant block that was produced, so they're getting involved in there. And the tokenomics of Bitcoin, as much as people love to see the price go up, really discourages it from any economic utility, discourages you from spending it, because there's eventually not going to be any more Bitcoin, and it's this narrative of it's some kind of real estate, so why would you ever give it up? Monero doesn't take that approach. Again, you can self-custody it, but there's privacy, there's fungibility, the history of the coin, where it came from, doesn't really matter at all. And the miners can't distinguish the transaction, so they can't block you. And some will say it's bad that Monero has an infinite supply, even if it's issued very slowly, but the reality is, because of this economic philosophy, it does encourage you to spend it instead of hold it for eternity, and because there will always be more Monero. So this brings to circular economies. And so when people talk about circular economies with regards to currencies, it's usually like spending, working, saving in this currency and not going back to fiat. So it's not really, I got Monero and I'm directly cashing it out to dollars. I'm staying in Monero. And a circular economy encourages efficiency and reuse and just better utility in that way. So it's not about just making the next Bitcoin miner that goes in the trash and pollutes everything. It's like, no, this can be used over and over again. So there's circular economies, there's parallel economies. So the circular economy enables people to spend and to participate in this economy, but it's parallel as well with Monero because it's outside of the control of the state. And you have to have that kind of privacy because you can be outside of the state like Bitcoin, but if they can track everything you're doing, well, you didn't really solve any problems there. So you have to have privacy to really have a parallel economy. And why, right? Why do this? Because you don't need a state to issue you an ID so you can go to a bank so you can open an account. You don't need any of that. And this kind of process that the state has enables discrimination on what you can access. Things like I was saying with CBDCs. They know who you are, and they know what you're buying. Well, they can say you've bought too much. We don't think you should buy anymore. Well, you can have to go and file forms why, but no, you won't have to do that. And if you have a real circular economy, you don't have to go back to fiat currencies and deal with that kind of paperwork. So Monero specifically is the best for a circular and parallel economy in the cryptocurrency space that I have seen, and many people have started to see this, because you can interact with people globally. If you want to buy or sell something with someone in Russia, well, have fun with the fiat system doing that. But if it's someone that you can interact with, then you can do that without any real repercussions. You don't need this third party. And it's easier to have commerce when you don't have to think about the history of that money and where it came from and what it's doing. So as a result of this, like I had said at the beginning, I have made a way to fulfill this vision more clearly with a site that's Monero specific. I called it Monerica as a kind of a joke, I guess, but it's really like this is the nation state that you opt into if you want. You're not forced to be a part of this country. You're not born into this country, whatever. Like, this is just something you choose to be a part of if you want, wherever you are, international, global, community, country. So some of the things that I've done, I went through all the directories that I could find that had crypto merchants. I did countless Google searches so I could find all the businesses out there. So you have artwork, you have clothing, digital goods and services, email, food, drinks. One thing that's very popular right now that's integrated into an app is gift card and prepaid card purchases, specifically gift cards for that app, but gift cards and prepaid cards. So you want access to the traditional economy. Amazon doesn't accept, Monero. Subway doesn't accept Monero, but you can buy a gift card through these intermediaries. So you can do that, and you can do that with these methods. And yes, credit cards. You can do that with some, but credit cards are issued by country, so it gets more nuanced, but you can do that. You can get access to other financial products. That's why I listed them. There are marketplaces, so there's places where you can buy and sell things like an eBay, and everything is in Monero. There's medicines, there's VPN companies, web hosting, many other things, electricians, translation services, other things, just all kinds of things. But it's circular. It's not just a business thing. Circular economy, meaning I want to educate people, I want to give them guides, I want to tell them if there's news, if there's talk shows, there's interviews. I want the full picture, the full circular perspective. I tell all the exchanges to buy on, all of the places that you can donate to that are nonprofits. There's a crypto for the homeless. They accept it. If you want to donate to a Ukrainian defense fund, you can do that. If you want to donate to Tor project, if you want to donate to anything out there that accepts Monero. There's a company, or not a company, there's a nonprofit in San Francisco that's like a psychedelic research company that accepts Monero, right? So there's all kinds of different nonprofits out there. I list all the software, all the wallets, mining, different utilities, and importantly, it's open source contributions that I take. It's not just me dictating, like, these are the things you can do. It's like, no, this is for the community. This is for everybody. And I've had success with that. Many people have submitted pull requests to my GitHub for Monero additions, or people have said this company doesn't take Monero anymore, or this is a new one, or I also have it so you can approve. You can say I have successfully made a purchase with them, or this is a scam. So it's meant to be a collaborative process with the whole community. So in summary, money has evolved, and it will continue to do so. Digital money is the money we all know right now. CBDCs are on the doorstep of everybody, and these give complete economic control to the government. Bitcoin, it tried to solve some of these problems with centralization by having decentralization, and it did do that, but it's not private. So Monero picks up where Bitcoin left off. It takes financial privacy seriously. It's more like a cash. It's more like a gold. And then you have these circular economies and parallel economies. So you can use Monero without the state approving how you use it. You also have it encourages efficiency and reuse. So that's, like I'm saying, I have every resource for Monero you could imagine. And everyone who wants to add or remove, they're welcome to do so. And most importantly, it enables you to transact freely with anyone, anywhere. And some of the resources I used for this book, The Bitcoin Standard, which is good at describing the history of money for a good part of the book, and also Mastering Monero, which gets into more of the technical details on how it works. Also, Seth for Privacy, who has this very detailed post on how Bitcoin was used in ways that it got censored or blocked or accounts got shut down. And I used some of these graphics for the circular economy, and of course, Monerica. And so here is my contact, my website, email, and if you want to hear some of my mixes or see what kind of crazy things I say online. And now I'd like to open up for questions.
Could you go back to slides there? Go back to slides. Yeah, thanks.
This? Or this one?
That one.
Hey, can you talk a little bit about how Monero is mined using memory instead of processing power?
Yeah, so it's mined similarly to Bitcoin. It's just that instead of it being application specific hardware, it's designed so that the white paper with Bitcoin was like one CPU is one vote, and it became like, well, what about a specialized CPU? So with Monero, it's really designed in such a way that you could mine it on your phone, you could mine it on any commodity hardware, and it limits the way that it can. So you could design something that would give this kind of performance for Monero, but one of the ways that they've limited it was the use of this is using more RAM, effectively, because you could have like a certain computer that can do a certain thing, but the RAM is what limits it. I can't go into a lot of the details on the algorithms. I mean, that is something I could help point you at, but that's one of the ways that it does it is by using your memory as a way that's very memory consuming.
Is the idea with that like basically two prevailing companies control all the GPUs, or?
So with the goal was that it's ASIC resistant, so that there can't be. So like if you wanted to mine Bitcoin, you would go and buy some kind of miner, but what happens before you buy it? That company was using it, and they're getting it. So by the time you get it, it's already obsolete. So by having this ASIC-resistant model, it's aimed at democratizing it more.
Right, and you mentioned all of the like FedNow, and I think one of the problems with crypto is, most goods and services are ordered through Amazon or bought at a local place, right? And getting in and out of your local fiat is like difficult for like normies, right? And then on top of that, when you get into crypto, it's like you're instantly traced because the normies are going to go to an exchange, right? And so there's like a challenge with that. And FedNow, I would say, for the time being, might be okay or a good thing in some ways, because right now the government uses, the 4 monopoly credit card companies to cancel people with powers they don't have, right? And so with FedNow, like people who have a podcast or mostly related to like creating content and stuff like that, they get canceled. The government's doing it indirectly with powers they don't have, but with something like FedNow, that will be forced through and adopted. It'll be compatible with credit card companies and all that, and allow normies to support like unpopular content based on what government wants. So, I would say it's coming whether we want it or not, but there is like an upside to that.
Yeah, there's definitely efficiencies to be gained with something like a CBDC. I mean, when there was stimulus checks, how much administrative overhead there was, and paper checks, and how horrible that was. So from the government's perspective, yes, this will reduce waste, but the trade-off is that there's no privacy. FedNow, to my understanding, is not for retail. It's for like institutions to work. It's not going to trickle down to like the average person, but I think it's like a test pilot for that. It's going to be like banks, I think, settling funds. Yeah, it's more. There's different levels of the CBDCs where there's like the institutions, the more privileged, they can transact much more money, or so.
Hold on. Just a quick question. It sounds like inflation is kind of built into Monero. So how would someone save money using Monero if by the day or by however many it's mined, they're losing it just by having it? So
it's a very small inflation amount. It's not. I guess. First of all, it's predictable, right? As opposed to, we don't know how many trillions of dollars they're going to print tomorrow. You have no control over that. At least you do know how much Monero there will be, right? So
It's less than gold.
it's smaller. It's a smaller inflation rate than there would be for gold. Yeah, to my understanding, that's accurate.
I was just wondering, with the lack of central control, how is like your account balance protected, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so that's what's very hard with this industry to grow, is that people don't trust themselves to have like one wallet with all of their funds in it. So there's many different ways to help mitigate that risk. You can have several different wallets. You can have a hardware wallet, you could have a software wallet, you could have several of each, you could have even some on an exchange just as a precautionary method. So, I mean, it's kind of like, how do you secure gold? I mean, why are there banks? Because people didn't want to hold gold in their homes. So maybe there will be some kind of more custodial way. There are some other things like multi-signature transactions where you could have, like, you have to have, say, 2 out of 3 people that authorize the funds to be moved. So there are different techniques.
I have a question. So a few years ago, the IRS posted a bounty. I believe it was $400,000 for anyone who could crack Monero. I believe they've taken that down since then. I can't find it actually posted anywhere. What do you think the chances are that Monero is compromised? And if so, at what level, and how much does that matter?
Yeah, so there was a bounty that I think it was 2 installments. One was like upfront, and the rest was if they like really tracked it. And I don't believe they ever got the second amount. So in that regard, there are many blockchain analytics companies or surveillance companies that exist, and to my understanding, they never solved it. If you watch series like Breaking Monero or some really deep stuff, and they've had people from these analytics companies come on and try to, they can't. So it's not. It's really plausible deniability. Like it's not like there's no way for a court to say like this was your transaction, like with 100% certainty. Maybe with like a very small percentage they could say, but it's not significant enough to prove that it was you. So it hasn't been claimed. Is Monero compromised at some levels? I mean, there was a story about government, someone from I think the Navy trying to sell secrets, and they requested payment in Monero. So it's there's no evidence of anyone going to jail for using Monero, unlike Bitcoin, to my knowledge.
Hey, awesome presentation. Thank you very much. Hey, are there any other privacy coins similar to Monero that you see as possible competitors or up and coming coins that might be something we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, with this space, it's all open source. Anyone can go and make something else, and they should, really. As far as ones that are popular, or a lot of people would say something like a Zcash because of its technology, but the problem with Zcash is that you have to opt into the privacy. So you have to opt in. And I met Zuko himself at the Ethereum thing, and I was asking him some questions. That's a different story, but no, I don't believe in it because I met with him. He's a very smart man. And I wanted to say, how could I use this privately, right? I could buy it on Coinbase, but when I send it to my wallet, I have to send it as a transparent, there's T and Z addresses with that. But anyway, Monero is taking a different approach. The math and the methods that they have are different. There's a fork of Zcash that does do privacy by default, but again, it's using some math that's not tested and well known well enough to really to be used. So I can't say off the top of my head any like Monero killer. There's things that are being experimented with, but they're not being adopted. So makes me skeptical.
With the fact that you can't really trace coins and their history, is there an issue trying to figure out what the actual supply is? Because like saying that the supply only grows by so much for each block mined is one thing, which I am curious about how they came up with like the 0.6. That's a cool question, I think. But also, how is there any way for anyone to say, the amount of coins out there doubled since yesterday? Somebody found some flaw.
Yeah, there's a good video that goes into a lot of detail on this, and it analyzes a lot of different points, but it's really looking at the code and seeing that this is where it's issued. This is the issuance point. There was an inflation bug that was discovered in Monero. There was also one that was discovered in Bitcoin where someone materialized like 1 billion Bitcoin or something, but they were able to write code that could confirm that this bug was solved in the Monero code. So no one knows how many dollars there are either. No one knows how much gold there is either. But to some extent, you have to trust the code, and that's just the reality. If you can't count every single unit, then you have to go through that process. So of course, there's always that risk. That is one thing that a lot of Bitcoin people do harp on. We can count every single one all the time, but the code is implying that it's only possible to make new Monero during the mining.
So kind of similar question. How do you figure out the market cap of Monero?
So there's 18.1 million Monero right now. Well, a little more than that or whatever, but that's what it is. So that's the current price times the total supply is how you get the market cap. So if Monero is $100 and just 18.1,
So based on what you just said though, and we believe there's 18.1.
Yes. Well, this is the way. So based on the way the blocks have been produced, this is what we believe.
Should be if the code does what it says.
Yes.
Right. That's the distinction that you were. Okay.
Well, so there are ways to have like a view key, so you could see, like, say you wanted to have a charity that accepts Monero, and you wanted to make sure that wanted to know how much funding there was for some kind of auditing purposes. You can do that, so you could do that, but there's no instances that I know of someone sending like more than the total supply of Monero to an exchange to cash it out or something like that. Like, it's something that's constantly being talked about, but I don't see that being true at this point. I don't see any evidence to prove that there's more Monero than the supply issuance allotted.
Okay, the second question is kind of about the connection diagram that was shown, where it's like Bitcoin has one connection and there's a different one used for Monero. And is that like a VPN, or is this a centralized server that everything routes through?
I don't know a lot about that aspect of Monero, but my understanding is it broadcasts the transactions in a way that kind of bounces them around globally.
It's Tor, isn't it?
I think you could, in the same way that Tor's just one node to the next node and the previous node doesn't know what it is. I think it's using similar technology to that. So you can't trace every hop. Like there's multiple hops. So I think it's something like that.
Can you go through sort of like the life of a daily Monero user? What's your favorite wallet? What's your favorite way to purchase it? How would you purchase something on Amazon? And what sort of like cool little hacks are there if you wanted to purchase something obscure?
Yeah, I didn't connect to the internet, so I can't go to the website. But there's many different wallets. So you can run the full node on a computer. You'll have to download the whole blockchain. That's considered the most secure way to do it. You could also use Cake Wallet or Monero.com wallet. Those are ones that offload a lot of that. And then as I was mentioning with gift cards, so Cake Wallet, I have met some of the people from there, and I was asking them because I was like, I have this site, and they were like, wink, wink, like we're gonna do something. So recently they did make it so within Cake Wallet or within Monero.com wallet, you can go and you can just browse. Like there's like 100,000 merchants that have gift cards, and you can go directly into there and use it that way. There's also coincards.com that was doing this before they were doing it. So that's one way to do it. There's other products you can use. You can depending on how much you trust, whatever, you can earn interest on Monero. You can lend it to an exchange and get interest on it, and then you can spend that. That's one way to do it. You could set up a business to accept Monero. So there's a lot of different avenues, but that's one of the things right now that I am trying to start is a way to do freelance work with Monero. I started a new Telegram chat for that. That's where this is leading me to. These are all the businesses, but like, how do we grow the businesses? How do we get more people to be involved? Because once people are working for it, then they will spend it, and then it will become. That's the biggest thing that's missing right now, I think, are jobs you can do for Monero.
What's your Telegram
It's Monero. It's Monero jobs developers. Yeah.
Hey, I still have another question. Have there been any hard forks, and if so, excuse me, and if so, what was the cause behind the hard fork?
So there are lots of hard forks in Monero. That's how it makes these big changes. So there was a hard fork in June, and that added a bigger ring size, so more signers, so more instead of I think it was 12 and it went to 16. So that had to happen through a hard fork. Some things that Bitcoin people don't like is that there are hard forks constantly in Monero. Not constantly, but like there were a lot at the beginning because it has to evolve. It has to adapt. It can't have this stuck in this dogmatic state. Satoshi said this, we can't change it. It's like, no, this is the problem. We have to solve it as a community. So there were hard forks, I think, every 6 months or so. Now I think it's much less frequently, every year or more, but that's required to make these kinds of big improvements. Unfortunately, that's just how it evolves.
Last question. Okay, I'll do the last question. So I was just kind of thinking about this. So Monero will never be adopted by governments, right? So do you think maybe there's a place for Monero and another cryptocurrency in a perfect theoretical system? Maybe the governments and publicly traded companies use Bitcoin. That way we can trace everything they're doing by default, and that's a good thing because that way we can see if the CIA is funding the Sandinistas in Nicaragua or paying pedophiles, and then the private citizens use something like Monero.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I do think so. You can pay your taxes now in Colorado with crypto. I think it's when Governor Polis said that at the Ethereum event here, I think he said it was only Bitcoin. I mean, to some extent, I think that's good. You want transparency for something that's like a public entity. For private citizens, yes, Monero. So I mean, what will get adopted? I don't know. I mean, it's more plausible that Bitcoin will become something that's more publicly accepted. We want to see this. Will there be something else? A lot of people are like, oh, if we could just have Monero as a stable coin, if we could just have all that privacy features as like a digital dollar, like that would be good. But that gets into a very complicated territory of like, how do you know what's backing it? And there's all kinds of crazy stuff with stable coins and anti-stable coin initiatives in the government. So, I mean, the Monero is the Monero. Like the work that was required, that energy that's required is what makes it valuable.
That's our talk. Give it up for Ryit.